So, a huge welcome to my tiny little podcast, Brian Slagel. Thank you so much for your time today.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So, for anyone who doesn't know who you are, which won't be many people listening, CEO, founder of Metal Blade Records, which has just celebrated your 40th anniversary.
Yes, we're
Yeah,
now in year 41 now.
that's amazing. Did you ever expect when you started it for it to be this big and this international?
No, of course not. I don't think any of us back in the early 80s expected any of this nonsense to happen. Just the fact that, so many of the bands from that era are still going strong, and a lot of them have become really huge. And the fact that I'm still doing this long into it is pretty crazy.
You've worked as a columnist for Kerrang. You've initiated the Metal Massacre compilations, sort of really shining a light on the bands that we see as huge today. Some like Overkill, Metallica, Slayer. Just it blows my mind. It really does. Go back to being a teenager. What was it about? First of all, how did you first hear metal? And what was it about metal as a genre that grabbed you as opposed to any other genre?
So when I was 11, a cousin of mine played me Machine Head by Deep Purple. I'd never heard anything like that before.
Mm-hmm.
And something just hit me. I was like, wow, this is incredible. So I went and bought it the next day at the used record store for $1 or something probably. And that same week, my neighbor said, hey, if you like Deep Purple, you should listen to Black Sabbath. So I listened to Sabbath by Black Sabbath, and that was pretty much the end of that. I was hooked.
Mm-hmm. Wow. And I've read on some previous interviews you've done that you used to trade tapes at high school.
Yeah, so I was what you would call a bootlegger.
Mhm.
So it was even before like the tape trading that happened, with Metallica and stuff. That was like tape trading demos and things, and I was involved a little bit in that. But prior to that, yeah, I would record live shows, sneak in a tape recorder, the whole thing, and just trade them to people around the world to get more of all that live stuff. And I did sell a few of them, basically to fuel any money I get. I went and bought records with. So it was just a way to enhance my music collection. But yeah, and that big turning point for me with that was. One of my friends in Sweden sent me an AC/DC live tape from Sweden. At the very end of it, he put on the Soundhouse tapes by Iron Maiden, and that was kind of the next big changing point for me. I mean, I love metal, I love all sorts of music, but that hearing Iron Maiden was like, oh my god, what is this? This is like the most incredible thing I've ever heard. And then the first record came out, and that really changed it for me, where I was just all about metal and the new wave of British heavy metal and all of that stuff. And that's really what kind of set me on the path that kind of led me into doing the record label.
I mean, think about the longevity that Iron Maiden have had and all these bands that you've worked with. I think there's not many other genres that have that longevity, I don't think. I think metal it's really special in that respect.
Yeah, I mean, we all believed in it, back in the day. Our moniker on a lot of the early Metal Blade T-shirts was "Heavy Metal will never die," and we believe that because a lot of people back then, it's a fad, it's going to go away, it's not going to last. We heard that all the time from everybody else in the music industry,
Mm.
and just the general public too. But we were like, no, 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 this is really great. It's gonna keep going, and sure enough, it still is.
That's one of the things I love about metal is it doesn't die. It goes through generations and it's amazing. And then also you talked about trading music. Like I love that feeling and I just don't get it with other genres is like recommending music to people and like getting recommendations and then like falling in love with even more stuff and discovering new stuff. Like I've been selling the new Zenith Passage album to everyone. God, that album is amazing. I love a bit of tech death, right? So I've been like recommending it to everyone and people are discovering tech death through it that haven't, on our little Twitter community. And it's just I love that about the metal community.
Thank you, and yeah, that record's doing really incredibly well too. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I mean, that genuinely uh was one of my most anticipated releases of this year. So they've smashed it. They really did.
Yeah, it's a great album.
It really is. Physical media, I'm talking like tapes, your CDs, your vinyl, it kind of had it had its heyday and then it kind of went over to streaming and now it's getting so much more popular again. What do you think the reason behind that is?
Well, there's a couple of reasons. I mean, first and foremost, I think people still like to hold something in their hands, right? And with vinyl, you don't get that if you're listening to something streaming. You have a little tiny image, and maybe you get the lyrics, and that's about it. But with vinyl, you get the whole package. And obviously, growing up listening to vinyl, it's a huge vinyl fanatic, and almost ended the company because I refused to believe that vinyl was going to die, and then all of a sudden it did for a while, and that wasn't really great. But yeah, I think people want to hold in their hands, and also what's interesting is when vinyl kind of first started coming back, it was very much a novelty, and I'm not sure how many people actually listen to the vinyl. You get reports anywhere from 70% of the people just bought it just to have it. And I think now it's not quite that much, but the other thing about listening to, a lot of people just grew up listening to stuff on the earbuds or whatever, and they don't have like an actual stereo. So with an actual stereo, you get that whole feeling of almost like being at a live concert where it sounds really good. And vinyl, to me, still sounds the best of any of the formats. So I think there's partially that, and like CDs never really went away; they're still kind of around, and there are a lot of people that prefer CDs, which is kind of interesting. And I still have a ton of them. I like them as well, and I listen to them on occasion also. But I have friends like a lot of older school guys, like my friend Eddie Trunk, who's a radio host personality here in the U.S., and he only listens to CDs. He won't listen to vinyl or anything else. So it's only CDs for him. So there's a lot of people like that. So, and it's just either people have not graduated to the other things yet, or they still like, I mean, I still have a real stereo. And I still like to go listen, sit in a chair and listen to the music out of big speakers every once in a while, which you can do obviously on the streaming stuff, but it's not as easy as it is with physical products. So, but I'm also super old school, but now cassettes are back. We're selling cassettes again. And I can think that that's only a novelty thing. I don't believe that many people have cassette players anymore, although you can still buy them, which is kind of crazy.
Yeah, I do get the feeling that the cassettes are more of like a collector's thing. It's like they just want to have it. My good friend and Metal Blade employee, Steve, he's a vinyl nerd. And I'm so jealous that he has boxes and boxes of alphabetized like vinyl, and I wish it was me.
Yeah, I kept all my vinyl over all these years, which is a gigantic pain because whenever you move with vinyl, it's not a whole lot of fun. And I don't like to have movers move my vinyl because I want to be in charge of it more or less. So I've done my share of moving a lot of vinyl around, but I kept pretty much all my vinyl. I never sold it. A lot of people I know did. Some don't care, and others like, I wish I never would have sold it. So
Yeah, I kind of get that though, because it's an investment. It's a lot of money, if you want to look
yeah,
after it.
yeah. It's always been my favorite form of listening to music. So I could never part with it. Like I mentioned before, I never thought it was going to go away, and then it kind of did for a while, but now it's back, so it's all good.
Hmm. Yeah, I love seeing all the different like variants and colors, and I think it's just very aesthetically pleasing when you see like all these like social media posts of all the different colors you can get. I think it looks great on a marketing point of view. I think it looks nice.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun to do that. I mean, I just love that vinyl's around. It's fun to do those sort of things. And of course, I'm still a collector. So, whenever Iron Maiden or Black Sabbath or, somebody puts out some new box set or variant or something, I'm like, I gotta buy that now. So.
First of all, do you listen to metal primarily? And what is your like if you comfort band? Like if you're having a really bad day and you just want to relax and just be happy again, what is it that you will typically listen to?
Yeah, I'd say it's predominantly metal. I mean, I'll listen to other genres if I'm not in control of the stereo or whatever. But yeah, for me, it's always been metal. And I'll go. I mean, I'm a '70s guy, so if I'm gonna, depends on how upset or mad I am. But it'll either be Iron Maiden, Ronnie James Dio era, Rainbow, or Thin Lizzy. One of those three will come up at the end of a bad day and go, okay, I can listen to that. Kind of depends on if I'm really angry, I'll probably go to Maiden.
I see. I've grown up with all those albums. My parents are metalheads, and my dad, he has all of those albums signed, and he has them on his walls in his house.
Oh wow.
And I've grown up with that. So all these amazing art covers, like the album art and stuff. So those albums are quite nostalgic for me as well. I really enjoy hearing so because I'm 31 years old, and I genuinely feel like I was born at the wrong time. I would have loved to have been from your generation to see how all the how metal was born basically, and how it grew into something, well, the huge thing that it is today. What was that like, watching metal just go from this to maybe sort of taboo thing to something that's so popular and diverse now?
Well, it's funny because everybody wants to be in a different generation. Like for me, I was very lucky to grow up when I did, obviously, but I read a lot of autobiographies. And I just finished Geezer Butler from Black Sabbath, whose book is amazing, and he's become a bit of a friend of mine. I know his wife pretty well. They actually live now part time here in the Las Vegas area. So, but I get jealous of seeing guys who grew up then, because they got to see everything really, especially in England. They got to see everything really form, because that's when they were going to see Jimi Hendrix in a club, or same thing, Sabbath, and all these bands kind of grow up. So I kind of wish I could have seen that. But that being said, being in LA in the 80s was pretty amazing, because there were like two separate scenes kind of that came from LA. And we don't get we don't get as much credit, I feel, as LA should for starting the heavy stuff, because three of the four big four, basically Metallica, Slayer, and Megadeth, all started in Los Angeles, and as well as a ton of other metal bands as well. But of course, a lot of people look at Motley Crue and Rat and that whole kind of hair metal scene that came out. But even those bands were a lot heavier in the early 80s. So it was fun being around. And, you mentioned earlier, you like to turn people on to music. And that's really, I can't play anything. So that's kind of where my thing came in, is I just love the music so much. And I ended up doing, like you mentioned, I worked at Krang, I started a fanzine. And then I worked at a record store. And that was like still probably the greatest job I ever had, because it was always my dream to be able to do that. And that was in the early, it was 1981. So, I was bringing all these imports in from Europe that I couldn't get before, and just turning people on to that music was so much fun. It was and people would just come from all over LA. I didn't know there were this many, metalheads around. And they say, what do what's new, what's good? And I'd recommend Iron Maiden or Merciful Fate or Accept, or, whatever it was. And that was super fun. And that's the reason why I really started the label in the first place, was just to turn people onto bands. And that's kind of still kind of what the whole emphasis is today. Just it's fun to find, new and upcoming bands. Like you mentioned, Zenith's Passage, it was amazing, and having this really great success so far with that record. And that's the most fun for me, is like seeing a band or hearing a band you really like, and then being able to work with them and pass that on to other people who enjoy it. So that's kind of where it started for me. And none of us ever thought, as I mentioned earlier, none of us ever thought this would become as big as it has, or a band like Metallica or Slayer would be, these kind of generational bands that, everybody, everybody knows Metallica, whether you're into metal or not, everybody knows that. And Slayer's not far away. Like a lot of people, even if you're not into metal, Slayer's kind of a universal band. Kerry King, who's in town today, so I'm supposed to see him later. One of my really good friends, and it's just kind of funny to go around with him, and, people recognize him that aren't even into metal. It's crazy.
The diversity and the subgenres that metal has nowadays. I spoke to my parents about this, and they said back in their day it was just heavy metal. Like that was just, there's obviously different bands, but it was just heavy metal. You didn't have like Funeral Doom and Tech Death and all this kind of stuff. And it was just, how do you enjoy the different subgenres? Do you have a specific one that you like, don't like? Like how has it been to watch sort of metal unfold and to sort of grow in that way?
Well, it's interesting because, when you talk to the bands, they all hate that sort of stuff. They don't like to be put in a category. And I get it. I totally understand. They're just making music. But it was really probably the fans that really started putting these bands in the genre, just to, I guess, and people who worked at magazines and whatnot, just to describe what it was. And I was involved in the early realm of that, because obviously, Metallica and Slayer and all those bands were at the time called speed metal. And that was the original, one of the original, I guess, subgenres And then you went to, the hair metal, and there's 1,000 of them now. So I mean, I'm not a huge fan of that, but I do get it that it's cool for fans, because if you like a specific thing, like you like death metal, then okay, what death metal is, and you know where to go to listen to it. And now you have melodic death metal, and all these different subgenres. I think it's kind of fun. I mean, I understand why the bands get frustrated by it, and it does sometimes limit stuff because people go, I don't like that because it's too technical or too whatever it is. So it can have the drawbacks, but then again, it is. I mean, we can't control it, so there's nothing I can do to say, to stop any of that. It is what it is. And like I said, I get it for the fans. It's kind of fun to be involved in a scene, and that's kind of what has really helped everything, because metal world is a scene, but then you have these subgenre scenes that people love too. So, look, as long as people are buying it and getting into the music, it's all good with me.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's good for maybe journalists to use it as sort of a descriptor. I think it's useful in that way. But I do think, I have been fortunate enough to work with some really amazing musicians in the metal scene, and they do get frustrated by, like you said, by the categories that the media puts them in. And then, like I said, it sort of narrows the sort of fan base, because people are going to go, oh, well, it says progressive on it. I hate progressive stuff. I'm not even going to listen to it. So I get that it must be frustrating.
Yeah, in a weird way though, like I said, I do think it also helps as well, because then it just, people, if they're into a specific thing, especially now, it's so hard to discover music because there's so many different avenues to do it. So if somebody says that, this is a whatever subgenre you want it to be, at least people know that like that. But it is hard for people because it's weird, because we go through these different phases in the metal world where people will listen to kind of anything and everything, and they'll be very open to different things, and then they get not open to different things. And it's kind of interesting how that sort of stuff happens. Like I like everything. I run the gamut from all the way one way to the most extreme stuff. I like all of it. But I do know a lot of people, a lot of friends who are like, no, I only want specific, European melodic death metal. That's it, or Scandinavian, nothing else. It's like, well, but try some other things here.
Yeah.
Like I said, I always have been into anything and everything in terms of the metal world. So I want the label to be that. I don't want to be. I think that's one of the reasons why we're still around all these years later, is because we didn't just jump all in on one genre and that defined what we were. We kind of all from the beginning had stuff from, even in the early days, we had bands like Pandemonium that were kind of more, hair-ish metal, and then you've got Slayer and everything else.
So we were talking about like comfort albums and comfort bands. Do you remember a specific time where a specific album has got you through a particularly rough time?
Oh, sure. There's a lot of that. I mean, one kind of funny story about that was, and the difficult time is I'm exaggerating a little bit about this, but I'm a huge American football fan. And growing up, I was a big fan of the Denver Broncos, who were, because I had a lot of family in Denver, and they were a terrible team for a long time, and then they finally got good. And they got in the Super Bowl, and sometime in the mid '80s, I forget what year it was, but they were playing Washington. And I never bet on sports at all, but I was so excited they were in. I was so sure they were going to win. So I bet, like, for me at the time, what was a lot of money. I can't remember the amount, but by halftime they were losing like 40-3. So I was really mad. So we were moving our offices, actually, and we had this huge party to kind of say, hey, we're moving to a different office. And it was right around the holidays too. So somebody had broken one of the doors, and I had a big collection of axes, and I think it was Mike Faley, who still works at Metal, but had stuck it in this broken door that we had at the office. So I was so mad and upset with that game that I drove to the office, which is probably 15 minutes from where I live, and put on Raining Blood by Slayer, and chopped the entire door to bits and pieces with that axe. Felt so much better afterwards.
That's an amazing story. Wow, you were pissed.
Yeah, I was pretty angry. And the door is already broken, so we're going to pay for it anyway, so I might as well put it to good use.
I love that. Amazing. So you obviously clearly have a good eye for spotting talent and what's going to be uh popular, for want of a better word. Who are your up and coming bands now? Are there bands now that maybe are signed to you that maybe aren't, that you think are going to be big?
Oh wow, there's so, I mean, there's really so many of
Mm,
them. Especially now. I think in the last couple of years, I've seen more bands that are upcoming that you feel is like, wow, there's a lot really going on here. I think these bands are going to do really well. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that we have, on our label. You mentioned Zenith Passage, which I think are spectacular. We have a band, True, that I'm really excited about. I don't get excited about a lot of things anymore, unfortunately, because I've seen too much. But we have a band called 200 Stab Wounds that I absolutely love, and I saw them play here in Vegas at the Psycho Fest last year, and I hadn't seen them before. I don't get blown away by much these days. I was blown away by how incredible they were live, and their new album's coming out pretty soon. I just heard it the other day. It's really, really good. So that's really exciting. The Black Braid thing is amazing. Those guys are phenomenal. If you haven't seen them yet, they're like a really interesting. It's really just one guy basically, but it's a really
yeah.
interesting story. Native Americans, and their stuff is phenomenal. Like there's Frozen Soul, which Frozen Soul and Creeping Death, a couple bands in Texas that are really, really good. I mean, they're already kind of big, but Lorna Shore is kind of blown up
Mm,
really, really fast. My friends manage them, and they're fellow English as well. So yeah, I mean, there's so much. I mean, I could sit here probably for the next 5 minutes and give you a bunch of
yeah.
names of bands that have a really good vibe now. That, like I said, I didn't see before. I mean, another band that we have is called they're called Capra, and they just got confirmed to like a couple huge festivals here in the U.S., which is great because they're kind of this like underground band with a really amazing female singer. There's a lot of that stuff going on now. I encourage anybody that's into whatever genre, like just dig deep, because there's so many good bands
Mm,
that are happening right now. Like I said, I think now is, like I mentioned earlier, probably the best I've seen this in maybe 10 or 15 years, maybe, of just the amount of new bands coming up that are really good, that have the right attitude and seem like they're, on their way to hopefully do well and keep the genre moving.
absolutely. I mean, I've all your picks there. I've listened. I'm a big fan of all the bands you just mentioned. I went to the Revocation, Goat Whore, Creeping Death, Alluvial tour when they came here to Denmark. Best show, seriously. They were all
Yeah.
lovely, and I got to hang out with them afterwards. They're lovely people, and that was a
Yep.
really good night. And that just the future of death metal. It felt like it's bright when you hear those bands. And like you said, Frozen Soul,
Yep.
their
Yeah.
new
And
record smashed it.
so good. And the cool thing too is, like you mentioned, I mean, all these people and all these bands are really nice,
Mm.
good people too. And that's, I always say that about in the metal world, because people go, oh, all blah blah blah. It's so heavy, and everybody's got to be out of their minds. It's like, no, I mean, almost more than any other genre. I've obviously a lot of friends that work in other genres, and country's probably the only one that maybe everybody's just as nice there as they are in our world, kind of. But yeah, just all these bands are just so nice, and it makes it great for me because they're friends more
Mm,
than anything else at this point. It just makes it really nice to work with people you're also friends with, and there's no drama or arguments or disagreements. I mean, I'm trying to
yeah,
remember the last time I had a disagreement with a band. It's been a long time.
yeah.
Yeah, it's all good.
It does feel like a family in a kind of way. And I typically go to concerts alone. And as a woman on my own, I feel safe. I feel so safe going to like metal concerts because it's the bands themselves and also the fans we have, it's just it feels like family. And I
Yep,
don't get that from other concerts that I've been to that have been non-metal. And I just
yep,
love
I
it.
would agree.
I really love
I would
it.
agree wholeheartedly with that.
Yeah. So, what I like to do at the end of each episode is play a little game with all my guests. And what it's called gift or curse. So basically the idea is I'm going to go through 5 things one at a time, and you have to decide whether you think that thing is a gift for the world or a curse upon the world. So it's
Okay.
simple. The fifth question is a recurring question which I ask all my guests, including my mother, who has been on this podcast, but you'll see why when we get there. So
Gotcha.
is that cool?
Yeah, of course.
Cool. Okay, so number one, classic, pineapple on pizza, gift or curse?
Well, that's a very interesting question because up until about maybe 10 days ago, I would have said absolute curse. Pineapple on pizza is horrible. But I did a book signing in LA, and the night before the book signing, I went to the famous Rainbow Bar and Grill, which I'm not really a big fan of, by the way. Sorry, Rainbow. With my good friend Don Jameson, and also my friend Glenn Hughes, who, if you don't know Glenn Hughes, one of the greatest singers of all time, and a wonderful, also British man, and his wife, and we all had dinner at the Rainbow. And they ordered a pizza. And I didn't really see what they had ordered, and I was too busy talking and not paying attention to the food. We all ordered a salad, and this pizza came out, and I go, oh, what? It was supposed to be a. They're all vegetarians, which is good. I'm mostly vegetarian as well. So okay, it was just cheese, but it had jalapeno on it. So I was like a little worried about the jalapeno because I like jalapeno, but I don't like the seeds. It's too hot. But anyway, so I tried this pizza, and I'm like, what is this? What are these little chunks on here that are oddly kind of sweet-ish? And they go, oh, it's pineapple. I go, really? Because their theory is the pineapple interacts with the jalapeno to kind of make it not as overly hot. And surprisingly, I was like, this isn't terrible.
Yeah.
So I'm still not going with a gift, but it's definitely a curse. But I'm much less a hater of that than I was previously.
Well, there you go. I mean, I'm on the curse side as well, just in my opinion. But yeah, that's great.
I agree with you there. Just that this one pizza actually kind of was halfway decent. So
Yeah,
there you go.
it's promising. So number two, something that a lot of metalheads will discuss and argue about, the snare drum tone on Metallica's St. Anger album, gift or curse?
Well, so I have a background story for this.
Mm-hmm.
So of course, right? So I was at this when they were making that record. I was up in San Francisco in the studio a lot with them for a variety of reasons. We had done a 20th anniversary box set, which they were very nicely to be a big part of, and so I went up there to talk about that, and then also to deliver that. So I was up there, I don't know, 4 or 5 times during the making of that record. And so as they were, kind of getting to, progressing down with the recording, they would play me some stuff, and I heard that snare. I was like, that's a really interesting snare sound. And they're like, yeah, we're gonna change it when we get to the mix. It's just we're just using it for now, yada yada. Like, oh, okay, whatever. And then the record, then I hear the final record. It's like, oh, they didn't change that snare sound at all. I kind of could get over it a bit because I do like it, but they did. If you listen, they did an EP, some kind of monster EP after the record came out that they redid the snare.
Mm.
The normal snare sound is way better. So I will, of course, go curse on that.
I think I have to agree with you on that one. I think I remember I spoke to the drummer from Allegiant, Jeff, um on his opinion on that. And he said if St. Anger had been a 90s hardcore album, it would have been perfect.
Yeah,
But he said other than that, maybe not the greatest artistic choice ever made.
yeah, they were listening. I mean, they're always a factor of whatever they're listening to at the time. They're heavily influenced by whatever they're into, and at that point they were kind of into all System of a Down and all that kind of '90s stuff that had the different drum tones on it. So there you go.
Yeah. So number three, doom metal, gift or curse?
Oh, definitely gift for me. I love doom metal. I mean, we were involved with it in the early days. We did all the Candlemass records in the U.S. and absolutely love them. And obviously, I mean, Trouble, in the early '80s started with us, and they were, probably one of the purveyors of doom metal. So I love doom metal. I absolutely would say gift on that one.
I had a feeling you'd say that. Cool. So number four,
Wait, you are not a gift on that one?
I think it depends on the band.
Ah, okay, fair
I
enough.
like a very high energy kind of metal, like tech death is what I really love.
Gotcha,
So I like a lot of energy. So it really depends. Oh, it's not a curse, but it's not my favorite thing. I'll
gotcha. Fair
admit
enough. Fair enough.
that. Yeah, so number four, music streaming services, gift or curse?
Well, I'm gonna. So I always have to preface this because people ask me this question all the time, and I'm gonna say gift, but let me quantify why I'm saying that for a couple of reasons. Number one, it's just it's more access for people to listen to music, which is great. And depending upon, so this is a very controversial subject. A lot of bands, go off, we don't make any money, da 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 da. So it depends on the band, it depends on the situation because we're the music industry itself and the labels are making a ton of money out of from these streaming services. Now the problem is a lot of the major labels are not passing that along to the bands. Like if you're on a major label and you've been there forever and you've got a royalty rate that for the 1980s or 70s or whatever was a good royalty rate, they're taking that royalty rate, let's just say it's like 16% or something. And the reason that those royalty rates were that way, because back then you had to manufacture vinyl or CDs, and there's a lot of cost involved, where streaming, there's no costs. So a lot of the major labels don't pass that along to the artist. So the artist is only making, in some cases, 15, 16, 17%, which is not fair at all. But most independent labels and most labels that care about the artists are doing much higher, 2-3 times higher royalty rights by that, and then you're making real money. I mean, we're writing checks every 6 months to a lot of our bands in the six figures, based probably 75% on streaming. So it's really good. We still wish it was more. YouTube, which is probably the biggest of all, is also the one that pays the least. So there's a big, I'm not a big fan of that, but I think we're getting there. And I think, the artists are getting smarter about what they should be getting for that, because they should be getting a much higher percentage. So if they are, then they're making decent money. If they're not, then they're not. But in general, I think it's really saved the business, because before, with all the file sharing and everything, and nobody's making any money off of that. So it's graduated. Is it a perfect system? No, it's definitely not a perfect system, but it's way better than it was before. And now you have venture capital companies and all these people outside the music industry that are investing in the industry for the first time ever, because they say, well, the growth factor, if you looked at years down the road, if how many more people are going to be buying streaming and all this sort of stuff, that they're very anxious to spend their money to get involved in the music industry, which we've never seen before. So I think ultimately, like I say, it's a gift now, but I do understand why some people don't like it and why some bands don't like it, because unfortunately for them, they're not getting paid what they should be getting paid.
Yeah, it's like the same with merch cuts. That whole debate with venues taking too much money, it's ridiculous, and it's really unfair, like you said.
Yeah, and that's a bad one, because they're all, and I feel for the venues on a certain level, because they were shut down for 3 years like the bands. But that being said, some of those prices are just completely insane. Like it's always been the venues. A lot of venues will take some of the money just for whatever reasons. Which again, we can debate that all day long. But to take as much money as they're taking, you're forcing these bands to charge $50-$60 for a T-shirt. It costs like $6 to make. It's insane.
Yeah, it is. Number 5, and I do apologize for this one. I have asked. This is my recurring one that I ask all my guests. Like I said earlier, including my own mum. Flavored condoms, gift or curse?
Well, I'm probably the wrong person to ask, because I'm not on the other end of the flavor. So I would. That's an interesting question. I would defer to I would probably defer to my girlfriend on that one. But I don't I don't know. It can be both, I suppose. It can be both a gift to one side and a curse to the other side. So I'll stay in the middle on that.
I totally understand that. I've had both the male and female perspective on my podcast for that one. Most men say, hell yeah.
I imagine the men are all like, hey, that's all great. And the women are like, eh.
Exactly.
Pineapple on pizza. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly that. Well, I will wrap it up there. Again, thank you so much for your time. It was really genuinely fascinating to hear your stories and to speak with you. I have huge respect for you and what you've done for the metal industry.
Thanks. I appreciate that. Thanks for all the support on your end. And it was always fun to do these things. So all good.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, and have a nice day.
Thanks. You do the same. Take
Thank
care.
you. Bye.